Okay, it's doing this rather than doing this.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Really exciting video today. I have with me Mike Malaska. How's it going, Mike?
Good. Yeah, great. I'm doing fine. Couple weeks out of hip surgery replacement, so I'm going to be. By the time I finish the summer, I'll have a new hip, I'll have a new knee, and I'm going to be the biomechanical person.
Well, it's funny. I think it was the $6 million man. I don't think 6 million would really get you much of a body anymore. Uh, Inflation has been a change since the 70s. I had planned to do this with Mike in person in Arizona, but he's still recovering from his hip, but this will work out just fine. He's got a studio. And what I wanted to talk about today, Mike, is that a lot of teachers are teaching chipping and pitching differently now. And what seems to just like normal consumers of golf instruction content, like people that are golf people, it seems a little different because forever we had heard about like more of a U bottom and staying like on like a plane and the bottom of it being very, very shallow. The like so-called new way of doing it that a lot of people are getting confused about is that, okay, I thought being shallow would be a good thing because it gives you more room for error. But now a lot of teachers are saying to stand super close to it, to not really even have much of a plane other than just kind of keeping it on the target line all the time. And then also like doing everything you can to hit down on it. This was something that I gave it the college try to do this, and I got much worse in my pitching and chipping just from like not seeing anybody in person, but just doing what everybody does, just like looking at on YouTube and Instagram of like, okay, how are they saying to do this? I tried this and it was like I got it wrong. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, like, what do you think about this way, and how is it the same or different than what's been taught? And then later we'll get into, okay, what is just a great way for everybody to pitch and chip the ball with a lot less confusion about attack
Yeah,
angle and what to
you
do.
know, okay. First of all, anything and everything these guys are doing isn't new. It's been around for a long time. I mean, I took Phil Blackmar, who's a good friend of mine, is probably one of the best short game guys I've ever been around. When we first started really working together, he watched my chipping and some of the things that they're doing now. He had me do, and all it did was it changed the bottom of my arc so that it almost made sure that I was going to catch the ball and then catch the ground. Because the biggest mistake people make in chipping is they're trying to get the ball in the air. And so, in their attempt to try to get it in the air, instead of letting the club do it and letting the bounce, and when these guys start talking about the club face, the way it's working, rather than going open to close and turning down, it's going heel back and then this way.
Okay.
Actually, when they're steeper, they're still coming down. They're actually engaging the bounce more this way than you were when you were turning the face down that way. So it's a misconception of how the club works relative to what they're doing. They're steeper, but they're using the bounce better. So anyway, so Phil showed me a couple of setup things and changed me. And just like that, it made me a significant better chipper. But like I say, there isn't anything they're doing that's wrong. However, so they talk about this as a visual thing.
What would be an example of something that they want you to feel but shouldn't really actually happen?
Well, the most important key, they say the club head, if I'm turned like this,
Hmm.
they say that the club head swings right straight back on the target line, okay? That it appears to do that, but it doesn't.
Okay.
Even the guys who demonstrated the club head, even when they put a box down, I love my pink grip here, it's my daughter's club.
Yeah.
So even when they put a box down, if the club is on any angle at all, okay, then what if it's like this, if you're up here, it's still going to swing on an arc,
Okay.
because if you make it swing the opposite direction, then you're manipulating the club. So these guys, when they set up the arc that they set up on, the club head swings pretty much on that arc that they set up. But visually, when you're looking down, it looks like the club head's going back out over the target line and on it and on the target line over here. But it's less of an arc because they're standing closer to the ball. So there is a slight arc in it. And I've watched
Mhm.
these guys on YouTube, and well, the club goes straight back. And the one thing is the tour players, the club head So if I'm sitting here like this, the club's sitting here. What they don't do is when they swing back, the club head doesn't get behind their hands and then come back around this way. The
Mhm.
club head swings back and it stays on this side of their hands. It hits the ball. Their hands go around here and the club's doing that. See what I'm doing? From a visual perspective, if you're close enough to the ball and you have the club up on the toe, it's going to look like the club is swinging like a pendulum. So the more the club swings like a pendulum, the easier it is to control the angle of approach, the easier it is to control the face. It just becomes easier and easier. When the more it swings on an arc and the more the face opens and closes, the harder it is to control what the face is doing. So like again, what they're doing and even their setup uh, isn't something that's new. Now, a lot of it is an exaggeration. I want you to feel like you're doing this. Now, if you actually go and do it, and you do what they're telling you to feel, then you get too far off, which is probably what you did.
Right. So if the club is let me grab. So the club's here, right? This angle, and you actually try to do it, and you end up like making a reverse U, like this way and this way,
Exactly.
trying to keep it on a line. Then that's like, oh, crazy manipulation to
Well,
try to.
now see, anything that fights the momentum of the club.
Yeah, because we're on this side of the club, and if you're trying to
Exactly.
make it not go like this, but like that, that's pretty weird.
So anything that
Yeah.
fights the natural momentum of the natural arc of the club is going to be a manipulation. Now, because I know you really well, I can just see what you did. You exaggerated that one and you exaggerated your head moving forward, and all of a sudden, all you're doing is sticking the club right in the ground.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Or panicking
so
and pulling it up. Yeah.
well, yeah, of course you. Anytime you. Okay, so here's a runway and here's a plane coming in. Now your brain, if the plane's coming in, all of a sudden, if the plane's coming in too steep, your automatic pilot says pull up. So when people get the yips, it's because the plane is coming down too steep too soon. So you've got to change where the runway is for the plane to land on the runway.
Hmm.
So when people get what they call the yips, I don't call them the yips. They have the saviors, because if they didn't do what they do, they hit the ball, they'd hit behind it 3, 4, 5, 6 inches every single time.
Right.
So they get to where they're coming down too steep and they see they're going to hit behind the ball. And so right at the ball, then they give it a little throw to try to get to the ball. Now, what these guys have done is, and I agree with some of the things that they're doing, how you set up to the ball, all it does is it changes the natural arc of the bottoming out of your swing. And the club is coming down into the ball and then it hits the ground. It's not coming down a whole lot steeper, but what's happening is because it's coming down and the heel of the club is leading the toe, so to speak. It's not really, but it actually uses the bounce more. So the way they want you to set up, get your hands high, okay, put the club on the toe, take the club what looks straight back and straight through, tilt out in front of it, and then feel like you lean forward when you hit it. All that's doing is it's keeping people from doing what we've always done, which is hang back. So when I watch golf swings, I watch circles. So if you set up and all of a sudden the center of the bottom of your swing is set clear back here like this, and the ball's up here, which is what most people do, they set up like this. All you're doing is now when you take the club back, see, it's going to hit right there every single time. All right, so all they're doing is they're saying, well, we're going to take this, or we're going to set you up this way. And what that does is when I go from here, is I keep changing my setup. See, it changes where my club bottoms out. So if I had a ball on this line, and I set up, and I take it back, you see the club head is still, if I drop the club right there, it would fall inside that line. But from my eyes, when I go like this and I take it, it looks like the club's right over that target line, but it isn't. See, it's right here. So it's on a slight arc. the really cool thing that they're doing, which helps people, is they're right. Nobody does this with the club nobody chips the ball like this anymore. Okay, they all chip it where the club goes this way, comes back down, it hits the ball, and then it goes like this. And if you watch this big club, see, it's even swinging, even though I'm keeping it here. See, that's in an arc.
Yeah.
It's in the arc that it's set up to swing on, okay? Now, because they go like this and they go like that, what's happening is the face isn't turning down. So when they say be steeper, all they're doing is they're just setting up like this, and it's just moving their swing center a little more forward. And because the club is working this way to this way, it starts to, as it runs into the ball, boom, it's engaging the bounce, and the toe of the club catches first. Now, when the toe of the club catches first, boom, if you hit behind it a little bit, what it does is it slows the toe down and it speeds the heel up, see?
Yeah.
And when that happens, if the toe catches and the heel speeds up, it engages the bounce and the club just slides.
Mm-hmm.
So the things they're doing that are really good, and I teach them, because I start with chipping, with pitching the ball, is just a putting stroke. That's how I chip. Now, is there an arc in that? Yes, there is. Now, when I go to chipping, my hands, I'm not using a putting stroke. I'm a little further, my hands are high, I'm close to it, and the club's working like this. Now, see, if I extend it past right here, if I go back, you see where it's at?
Yeah, a little more in.
Okay, and then I come down and I strike the ball, boom, and then it swings around over here. If the club's working that way, which is staying at a 90-degree angle, now the club face is staying at a 90-degree angle to the swing arc. Okay, it's doing this rather than doing this. Okay, this is really hard to time, even in your full swing. So now once the club is swinging and the club face is working at a 90-degree angle to the swing arc, and then you change your setup so that your swing bottom starts to happen forward of the ball. So you can just let the club, see, I can just let the club swing and it hits the ball, hits the ground. Now, it's steeper, I guess, instead of going this way. That's too much shallow. Nobody does this anymore. Nobody chips the ball unless they're trying to hit some kind of weird shot. Nobody's doing this and doing this.
Right.
They're all boom, boom. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Mike, can you you have the energy. Can you show us what you were doing and then what Phil told you to do and kind of what the change was, if you can?
Oh, yes, for
go back
sure,
in
for
time?
sure. My big miss was this. My entire career, everybody said, when you hit chip shots, put your weight on your left side. So that's how I put my weight on my left side.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I shifted like this.
Yeah.
Now the problem is when I shift like that, you see how it tilts my shoulders.
Yeah.
So as soon as it tilted my shoulders, then the swing wanted to bottom out back here. The ball sitting up there. So then what I would do is I'd put the ball way back, which would then make me way too steep, so I couldn't, I'd either hit it perfect or terrible. So the first and main thing he did is he says, okay, Mike, look, you want to be on your left side. There's two ways to get to your left side. One is like this, where I could stand on my left foot. The other is if I'm going to lift my left foot, but I'm not going to move my left, or lift my right foot, but I'm not going to move my left hip. See how I side bend this way?
Yeah.
So I'm putting a little bit of side bend into my setup, and then I set up to the ball, and then I just make a swing. All those guys are doing is when they say move your head forward, all they've done is they've taken your spine angle and they put a little bit of side bend. Well, I put it in first, and then I just swing. I don't try to put it in while I'm swinging.
So how much weight or pressure or whatever is on your left side when you're setting up for chipping?
95%.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you really could do it just as well with your foot almost off the ground.
Oh no, that was
Right.
one of the drills that I would do.
Yeah.
getting around pretty good for my bad hit, for brand new hit.
I think your wife wouldn't like all this.
No, just don't show this video to my wife because she'll scream because I'm bending and twisting. Okay, so yeah, I'm pretty much like this.
Mm-hmm. And which hip did you just have fixed?
This one.
Okay, all right.
So I'm not. I mean, this one's just
Okay.
sitting there. So
But this is one of the drills you did.
I'm basically chipping and or pitching just like this. So I tilt this way a little bit, bend over, and I just stay right there, and that's how I hit up to about a 60-yard shot.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And my club face, my grip changes because it goes from being in my fingers to being more in the palm of my hand.
Inside of 30 yards for the most part?
Up to about 50 yards. I'm right here.
Okay.
And the reason it's there is because one, I can get the toe of the club in the ground, and two, my wrists lever this way and this way, but there is no up and down.
Mm.
See, up and down sticks the club in the ground. If you go like this and like this, even though my wrists are working, see, the arc of the club is staying really pretty shallow.
Right.
As soon as my wrists start to go this way, the club starts working too vertical, and that's too hard to time it.
Okay, gotcha.
So I'm set up to the ball, and then just boom, boom,
mm-hmm.
boom, boom. And because the ball is, because my setup is such that my bottom of my swing happens in front of the ball, I'm going to catch the ball first.
Okay, gotcha.
So I'm set up. If I make a swing, see, the club's going to bottom out in front of the ball. So when I make a swing, all I got to do is just let the momentum of the club swing, and the natural arc is going to make the club do what it's supposed to do. So again, one, you want to feel like you want to take as much rotation of the face out as you can. Mm-hmm. Visually, that's going to appear like the club head is staying on the target line. And for most people, because they're so into roll the face open and roll the face shut, when they actually take it back correctly, it's going to look to them like the club stays outside the target line, hits the ball, and stays, like you said, a U shape this way.
Mm. But not really.
Not in reality. In reality, it's making a slight arc. It's swinging on the arc that the club is set up, because you don't want to fight the momentum of this club head. When you set it on an arc and you start it moving, you want the weight of the club doing what it needs to do to help you hit it. You don't want to be manipulating it one way or the other.
Okay, gotcha. What do you think if somebody was to measure most really good chippers and pitchers from a fairway lie, like a good fairway lie, like almost like a driving range lie, how down do you think it would be?
You know, I've seen it at TaylorMade. They're all over the map. Here's what I will say. The tour players, the ground is their friend. Okay? So they want to let the club hit the ground, because when the club hits the ground, because of the way they use the face, the bounce works, and so the club hits the ball, it hits the ground, and then the club slides. I took a lesson years and years ago from a great short game teacher, Phil Rogers. Phil Rogers worked with Nicholas, and I took a short game lesson from him, and down at Fairbanks Ranch in California. And I wasn't chipping very good, pitching. And I hit a couple of pitch shots. He says, "Give me that club." And so he takes my club, and he sets up, and he puts it, it's kind of this sandy lies, down there in San Diego. You get that. And he takes the club back, and he hits about, so the ball's sitting here, and he hits about 2 or 3 inches behind the ball, and the club just slides into the ball, and he hits this nice little soft pitch shot. And he goes, "There's the key to pitching." He says, "You got to be able to hit 3 inches behind it and still hit a good shot." So then I'd get up. Of course, at that time, I was really into, roll the face, hold the angle, turn the face down. So I'd take the club back, and I'd hit 3 inches behind the ball, and I'd just stick it in the ground. He goes, no, watch. So he'd take my club, but he never really told me how to do it. He'd just stand up, his club would hit the ground. Well, what was happening is my club face was opening. Let me get in the picture. My club face was opening and closing and turning the leading edge down. See, like this? So when I hit 2 or 3 inches behind the ball, boom, the leading edge would dig. Now, what he was doing is he was swinging it. He had that figure eight, so he would take it out and he'd loop it. But when he brought it in, the club was working this way. So what he was doing is he'd come down and the toe was coming down, but the heel was leading like this. So when his club would hit the ground, it didn't hit flat, hit on the toe, and then the heel would speed up, so the club would hit the ground behind the ball and it would slide.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the tour players want the club, they're okay with the club hitting the ground, even if they come in what you would call fairly steep. But as they're coming in fairly steep, the face is working such that the bounce works after they hit the ball. So what I would tell you to do, forget the ball for a minute. Go out on the range, find a nice piece of grass, not on, where it's a little wet maybe, and just stand there and play around with different ways that the club where you can hit the ground with the club, but it doesn't dig.
Right. It should like bruise the grass, but not get all the
Yeah,
way to the dirt.
it
Yeah.
just barely. As soon as it hits the ground, it feels like it hits the ground and slides, rather than hits the ground and digs.
Mm.
And you just stand there and you just hit the ground with the club, and figure out the angle of approach you need and what the face has to do for it to hit the ground and slide.
Right. Gotcha.
Hit the ground, slide. That's another thing that Blackmore had me do, is put the club on the ground and slide it along the ground. Slide it along the ground. And then I just copied that feeling.
Yeah, in motion.
So then you start to learn how to make this part of the club and this bounce part be your friend. So you can hit the ground, because the club's not, the leading edge isn't turning down. See, none of those guys, unless they're trying to hit a little draw chip or something, or if they're on really, really tight Bermuda grass that's grainy. Now you have to catch the ball, and then what they'll do there is there's no bounce work. So you have to catch the ball first, and boom, and then the club's going to stop. They've even shown pictures on TV when they get in certain areas of the country, and they'll zoom in on a chip shot, and you see them, and the club hits the ground, and they slow it down. The club comes down, and it hits the ball, and the club goes boom, and it actually goes backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that kind of grass, you have to catch ball first.
Right.
Doesn't matter where the face is, because if you hit the ground, you're going to hit it. I mean, it's a disaster. That's why those courses are really hard for even the tour players to chip and pitch on.
Next thing I wanted to ask you about is like, okay, if the ball is sitting on the ground, but like a table or like this book would be like, that would be, the ground would be like that, where
Right.
the ground is the ball. But because it's almost always on grass, hopefully, it's actually going to be almost up on a little bit of a T, like the little leaves of the grass are going to hold it up a little bit like that, like almost make it float. So because of that, where should we be soling the club? Should we be putting it like a little high, or like into the grass, or right at the level we want it to be at? I know you told me something about this.
That's a really good question. I mean, that's the biggest mistake people make. One of the biggest is when we go past their setup and how they grip and was where they set the club relative to the ball. Now, anytime you swing an object, you swing a club, what's going to happen when the momentum of the club comes down? It's going to want to elongate your arms a little bit, because this now has momentum, so it's pulling on your arms. So the last thing you want to do is, when you're setting up to hit a shot, is set the club on the ground. Because what's going to happen now is when you come down, the club's going to want to elongate a little bit, so you hit it fat. So it's called under reach. So most all the tour players, when they set the club down, they don't set the club on the ground. They set the club right about here.
So is that about like 1/4 of the way up the ball?
Yeah. Okay. So it's not resting on the ground, say. And so then when they swing, they almost feel like they have to let their arms straighten out to hit the ground. Amateurs set up to the ball, and their arms or bent, and they set the club on the ground. And then they swing, and the momentum of the club, then they move their body, and it moves and it drops their bottom, and then boom, they're hit behind it. So everything they do is encouraging the club to hit back here.
Mm-hmm.
See, everything I'm doing is encouraging the ball to catch the ball and catch the ground. Catch the ball, catch the ground.
Yeah.
And the less the face rotates, now here's what those guys are doing. Their face goes like this, but it's still relative to this shaft angle. That club head's going right up that shaft angle. It's not going on the target line and on the target line.
Mm. Yeah.
Because if you try to do that, then you have to fight the momentum of the club, and now you're manipulating it. If it swings right on the target line, boom, boom, and you get close to it and it's swinging like this, and you're letting the momentum swing, then the momentum of the club drops the club down onto the ball. So now you're not fighting momentum.
So
See, the whole game,
just by standing closer to it, that's gonna make this arc be more like this rather
more
than
vertical.
staying far away from it and trying to do this.
Oh, now you're dead.
Right. And then the same thing with this is like you don't have to, if you're set up more like this, you don't then have to put like extra down into it.
No.
For steepness. It's like the steepness is built into your setup.
The arc is already determined by how you set up.
Okay.
So basically what I'm doing is I'm standing like this, and I go like that, and I do, it's the same thing in your golf swing. I mean, in your golf swing, biomechanically, there's a little bit of side bend. See, there's side bend.
Sure, yeah.
You're not trying to go this way. So if I take this and I go like this a little bit, and I bend from my hips, that's going to make the bottom of my swing happen slightly in front of the ball.
Yeah, and you can feel when you do this, and then you bend over. Now there's about 95% on your lead leg.
Yeah, so you don't have to.
Yeah.
See, anytime you're trying to chip the ball. I mean, this is what's hilarious. You're taking a really tight line, and you've got to be really precise with where that club bottoms out, okay? And now they're getting you to feel like you're moving, that you're moving.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most insane thing I've ever. Now, I understand it from a practice perspective to exaggerate something. But when you watch the good players, they will have, if anything, when they hit chip shots, they get set up. And when they go back, if anything, their head might move a little bit this way, and then it stays there.
Okay.
You won't see anybody chipping where their head's doing that when they're chipping.
Okay.
You know, they might have a little of this.
The little counter movement.
All that is it's a miniature side bend. See?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. That's perfect.
Okay.
And what that side bend does, and set up on your left side and you're right here, as opposed to your full swing, that little bit of side bend moves the bottom of your swing arc further up in your stance.
Gotcha. Cool. That was a great deep dive on pitching contact. The last thing I want to ask you, especially like when it comes to when you were working with Phil, once you've gotten a better bottom and you're actually clipping it nicely the way you want to, what did you do to develop distance control as far as like, hey, there's a spot I know I'm going to hit it well, but I need to land it there, not 3 feet past it or 3 feet short of it. You know, so what did you do? Was it clock system or what did you use?
Well, I've always, one of my favorite drills with putting has always been a ladder drill, where you hit a ball and then you hit past it, and then you hit past it, and then you come back and hit between the first two, hit between the second two.
Yeah.
So, I can remember when I was chipping and pitching the ball not so well, everybody would say, well, don't be so mechanical. Just look at your landing spot and just go. Well, I'd hit it fat.
Sure, yeah.
So it didn't matter how well I looked at the land, because my technique was, my bottom wasn't working. So once I got set up correctly, where every single time the club was hitting the ball, then I could set the club face in different positions. I could make the face do different things, make the trajectories change. And then I would hit one ball, and then I'd hit a ball past it, hit a ball past that one, then come back, hit between the first two, between the second two, pick my balls up, go off the side of the green, do the same thing. So I wasn't always just chipping to exactly the same spot most of the time. And if I was, I would pick a spot and I'd chip to it, and I'd do it until I landed it where I wanted to, or it ran out to where I want. And as soon as I did it correctly, then I would change to another spot. I wouldn't stay there and keep trying to do the same thing, because what happens is that's not golf. That's golf, you get one try. That's it.
Right.
So you have to start to practice to some degree how you play. So you have to put time between shots. You get one try. So when I was chipping,
when you were rebuilding your swing bottom, was that more of a big block practice thing when you were, trying to change from being,
for sure.
Okay,
Now
so that was a lot of balls, and
I would have to hit quite a few, and I'd get set up and I'd make. Now, another thing that's interesting, when you watch the tour players, and we all like to copy them. This is one thing. Everybody can copy what the tour players do up to about 50 yards. And then then it starts to get where the physical stuff
you got to be a much better athlete to go beyond that, yeah.
But when you watch these guys, what's the shot they make the most practice swings on? A chip shot. And why? Well, here's what they're doing. So they look at the lie of the ball. And they say, okay, there's the lie, and here's what I've got to do with it. Okay, so then they come up and they stand up right next to the ball. And they stand here, and they know what they want the club to do. So they stand here and they make little practice swings until they get their setup and such where the club bottoms out correctly and the club's doing what it's supposed to do through the ground. Now, they may make 5 or 6 practice swings. And as soon as they get the club to do what they want it to do, they set up to the ball, and all they do is they copy the circle. So they make all these practice swings to adjust their setup so the club automatically bottoms out correctly. And then depending on what they want the face to do, they'll do some little doing whatever they're doing with the face. And as soon as they get a feel for the combination of those two, bottoming out correctly, the face doing what they want, they set into the ball and just duplicate the circle.
Now, are tour players doing something with the face through impact? Are they like kind of putting a bunt on it? Or
well, yeah, but now we're okay. Yeah. Here's what Blackmar told me. He says, I asked him, and this was really good, especially for the average player.
Yeah.
I said, Phil, I want to learn how to use the bounce more.
Yeah.
And he goes, Mike, I don't think I've ever seen anybody hit the ball with the bounce.
Right.
You have to learn to hit the ball in the face first, okay?
Yeah.
So most of the people we're talking to, if we get them set up correctly, and we get them where their swing arc is going to bottom out, it's going to catch the ball and bottom out, and they're not too far away, so they're not too shallow. Now they're going to catch the ball in the center of the face, and they're going to start. Then they use the club with the same method. They change clubs to get different lofts. Or they may set the club in a different position, but they make the same motion and catch the ball solid. These guys are good enough. They can come down into the ball, and right as the club hits the ball, they can turn the face one way or the other and make the ball do something.
Right.
But that's assuming a level of competency that the average person doesn't have, and you really don't need it.
Okay, right.
It's the same thing with golf swings. See, we are in our industry assuming levels of competency with the person we're talking to that they don't have. They don't have the hand-eye coordination and the proprioception that these tour players do. So asking them to duplicate something a tour player does is assuming that they have somewhat the same proprioception and hand-eye coordination relative to this thing that a tour player does, and they don't. So the information's nice, but it doesn't fit the patient.
Final question about this. I know there's some like procedures and things to do to find how far to stand from the ball for a full swing. People say you clap your hands together, you just kind of bend over, and then you hold the club so that they're hanging down. With a basic pitch motion, how can we find how far is a good distance to stand?
Okay, all right. So let's talk about. So what are you going to hit the ball with? Well, you're going to hit the ball hopefully with the club.
Right.
So the first thing you want to do is you want to set the club up. Now, when I pitch and chip, my club is more in the palm of my hand because I don't want it going up and down like this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I set my grip, and then the first thing as I do is I come in. You see, this is going to be flat. So I set my grip, and the first thing I set up is I set the club up. Then I set my body up to fit the club. Then I go ahead and make a swing from there.
Gotcha. Okay.
So in golf, anytime you make a swing more than about a 20, 30-yard shot, what's going to happen when you swing is the club is going to do this and your arm's going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the club's more in my fingers, there's going to be a little more angle here when this flattens.
Yeah.
There's be a little more angle between my arm and the club. If I put it more in the palm of my hand, and if I do it like a putter, it's dead straight, okay?
Right.
But this is going to happen. Boom. That's this lever. So I set this lever, and I set that in behind the ball. So now I know that this lever isn't going to change. So the length of it isn't going to change.
Right.
If you set with your hands like this, and the lever changes, you stick it right in the ground because the radius gets bigger.
Okay.
So if I set up like this, and I swing and the club pulls my arm, so my arms go that way, the club's going to stick in the ground. So you get your grip, you let the weight of the club flatten this, you set the club in first, you set your body up to fit the club, and then you just make a swing and let the club drop on the ball.
Gotcha. Mike, when you're putting it more in the meat of your hand here, is the V here also going a little bit more towards your nose rather than to your trail shoulder?
Mine stays at my trails. No, so when I go more in the palm of my hand, whether I'm so whether if I had a full swing grip,
yeah,
a chipping grip, or a putting grip. Now my putting grip is where it starts to go here. But if I'm going full swing driver, full swing pitching, see, you can't see any difference much.
Right. Okay, gotcha.
But the club is moving. It's moving from here
to
here, from here to here.
Yep.
But this angle, this state, because I want my left hand to want to hit like this.
Right.
I don't want the back of I did that my whole professional career. And and guys do it. They do this, but that's a weak joint. My left hand wants to hit like this.
Gotcha.
So full swing, pitching. Full swing, pitching. It's just a different place in my fingers.
Gotcha. Okay, guys, thanks for watching that. If you have any questions for Mike, we're going to try to make this a more regular thing, maybe once every 2 months or once a month or something like that. If you have any questions for Mike and you want to see them addressed here, be it pitching, chipping, driver, Alaska move, any of that stuff, write it in the comments to this video. I'll make sure Mike does that, and whoever's comment gets the most likes, we'll address it. If people are interested in seeing more with Mike Malaska, the best place to go, or maybe the first place to go, is also here on YouTube, and subscribe to his YouTube, Malaska Golf. And then also, Mike has all this in a great level of detail with great production value and everything else at MalaskaGolf.com. And for Be Better Golfers, there's a special promo code called, I'll put it in the description. I think it's Be Better Golf or BB Golf or something like that. I'll put it in the description of this video, and you can get a discount off of membership.
That's awesome.
Great site. All right, Mike, final thoughts on if people are really having a mental problem about contact of pitching and chipping, where's the first thing they should look at?
Well, the first thing they should look at is how they're set up and how their setup affects where the club bottoms out. 99.9% of people that show up, when they chip, they're all tilted. See where my shoulders are? They're all tilted this way. If they do nothing more than take their head and they do this to it and put it here and chip, they're going to get significantly better. So you remember in the golf swing, they all talked about when you set up to the ball, you put a club here and then you tilt and put it on this leg.
Yeah.
Well, there's full swing. In short game, you tilt and put it on this leg.
Yeah, great tip.
I mean, if people would do that, and
Yeah,
then
you might
catch
not
the,
need all the other complicated stuff. You might just be
yeah,
good to go.
and get a
Yeah,
little closer to the ball, which is going to put the toe up, which is going to, you don't have to think about the things they're making you think about. Your setup and your grip take care of them, and they become automatic more than something that you're trying to manipulate.
gotcha, gotcha.